Good to see everybody on this Children's Sunday. We'll have a prepared little festival afterwards. So after the service, if you want to, you may come back around 12, and we'll have some games and also grilled hot dogs and hamburgers. I'd like to invite all of you to that. And the weather forecast says that sun will be out by then, so it'll be really nice. But anyway, today's passage is a lesson on humility, as you probably have guessed from listening and reading it. It's a warning against thinking too highly of ourselves. I think we make that mistake of thinking ourselves a little bigger or a little higher, a little better than what it usually is. You probably have a similar experience, but I clearly remember a humbling experience about 10 years ago. And that's when I was really into playing ping pong. There was a ping pong fever at our church. So everyone was playing ping pong after the service. After the morning prayer, we go downstairs, set up the ping pong table, we play it for an hour or two. And then after Sunday service and after lunch, we all go down, again, clear all tables and set up the ping pong tables and play ping pong. And after doing that for a couple of months, I felt really good because I felt like I was really improving. My shots were really going in the right way, and the ping pong ball it looked like it's really it's like it goes really well, and you have that good feeling, right, when you hit the right spot and then the ball goes into the right spot. So I felt really good, and then I read from the local newspaper. This Korean newspaper was sponsoring a ping pong tournament. And I felt really good. So I was like, maybe this is my time to shine. And they had 3 divisions. Division A was for the expert, and Division B was for the regular people, and Division 3 was for the beginners. And there's some nice prizes as well. So I thought to myself, maybe I can go for Division B. I didn't expect myself to be in the A. Not yet, but I'm sure I could compete in the Division B. But one day, while I was thinking about that, one day we had a we had a monthly fellowship. And then at the church where we were having that meeting, there was a ping pong table. Thought we'd decide to play a little bit of game, and I was playing with this another pastor who was really good. I mean, he was really good. And after the game, I complimented him, I told him about this tournament that's coming up. I told him maybe you should enter, and he said, "Yeah, I actually participated in the last year's tournament." And he said, "How did you do it?" He said, "I entered the Division 3, and I got beat up really bad on the first game." And I was going to go to the Division B, And after hearing that, I just gave up that tournament thing. Ping pong is just a hobby. But, there it was. I was awakened to realize that in the world of table tennis, I wasn't even a beginner. And you probably have had a similar experience of that root awakening that you're not really as good as you thought you were, right? You see, we are not as great as we sometimes mistakenly think of ourselves. There was an elderly priest and a Boy Scout boy and a nuclear scientist. For some odd reason, were flying a small airplane together. In the middle of the flight, the pilot jumped out of the cockpit, which is not a good sign, and he screamed that, plane is going down. We need to get out of here. Get your parachute and, get out. And he picked up his parachute and jumped out of the plane. And then this nuclear scientist grabbed another parachute and said, I'm the greatest mind in this world. The world needs me, so I need to survive. So he grabbed the second parachute and jumped out of the plane. See, the problem was there were only 3 parachutes. And then this pilot took one, the scientist took the other one, so there was only one parachute left, right? And this elderly priest, being, what he was, told this Boy Scout boy, boy, I have lived my life. I'm old. I don't really have to live any longer. So why don't you take this parachute and, make yourself survive. And this Boy Scout boy kind of looked at him and said, Father, you don't have to die. You see, the greatest mind just jumped out of the plane with my backpack. So there were 2 parachutes left. You see, sometimes we think of ourselves as the greatest mind in the world, but where sometimes the reality is we're dumb as not to be able to distinguish between parachute and someone's backpack. So that's what it is. And today's passage says that, when you enter the wedding, and I think of it, I kind of look at this parable as a parable about the final banquet, the banquet in heaven. When God prepared this banquet in heaven, and we enter the heaven, and we see this, wonderful banquet prepared. And what Jesus is saying is that don't jump to the head of the table thinking that you're some greatest, believer, because you're just 권사님, because you're, a pastor. That don't jump to the first seat, because, again, that may not be your spot. Instead of aiming, and also another thing is that instead of aiming for the head table on earth, I hope that all of us can live our lives in a faithful way, looking forward to the heavenly banquet, to the head table at the heavenly banquet. Sometimes we work too hard to gain the recognition of this world, but we forget that our real prize is in heaven. I heard this story some time ago. This deacon, this 집사님, really humble and great servant of God, died and went to heaven. And heaven was a great joy to receive, to welcome this faithful servant. So the Saint Peter said, you faithful servant, you did a lot of work. This is the person who does all the odd job at church, right? So Saint Peter was so pleased to see him, and he said, welcome. You lived a hard life. You worked so hard. Just enjoy this bliss in this heaven. You don't have to work at all. You just enjoy. Go to all whatever place that you want to go. Eat whatever you want to eat. This is for you. So he walked into heaven with joy, with a joyful heart, and he spotted this pizza place. He wanted to see, how the heavenly pizza tastes. So he went in, and it's like, he was just wondering what kind of pizza would be there, And then he saw his elder from his church, this 장로님 from his church, bussing the table. And this 장로님, this elder was kind of person who never touched a wet cloth at the church. He never, wiped the table while he was at church on earth. But this elder was, bussing the table, wiping the table. And so this deacon was so happy to see him. He says, wow, 장로님, hey, elder, so good to see you, sir. And I guess this elder was a bit embarrassed that he was, bussing the table. And it's like he tried to kind of avoid him, but this deacon was so happy to see him, just walked right up to him and said, hey, sir, so good to see you. How are you? So good to see you in heaven. How have you been doing? And tried to strike the conversation. And this 집사님, this deacon asked him, so, so good to see you here, but have you seen our pastor here in heaven? And the elder said shyly, he said, well, he's out delivering pizza now. Well, who would sit at the seat of honor in heaven? In Luke chapter 18, we find that it is indeed those who truly, with a broken heart, and who are humbled in God's presence and God's grace. In Luke chapter 18, Jesus talks about Pharisees and a tax collector going to the temple to pray. And the Pharisees was so proud of himself. He says something like, Lord, thank you for your grace. Thank you for your grace. I fast twice a week. I do this, I do that for you. And then, I'm so glad that I'm your servant. The posture in the story, the posture of this Pharisee was he stood up and just looked up heaven. He was, going like this and, basically saying, I'm so great in God's grace. On the other hand, there was this tax collector who was standing at the corner of the temple who could not even lift his head to look up. He was beating his chest and say, have mercy on me, O Lord. Have mercy on me. Have mercy on me. I'm a sinner. And Jesus said that on that day, the man who was honored with God's grace is not the Pharisees who was so full of himself, but it was that tax collectors who saw his dire need, the need in God's grace. Just like the tax collectors who humbly prayed, acknowledging his unworthiness, we should approach God's grace with gratitude, realizing that it is only by his grace alone that we live well and have the opportunity to enter the heaven. There cannot be any pride when we enter the heaven, right? Only gratefulness and only the humbleness. Therefore, let's not be arrogant, but truly be humble, focusing only on God's grace. Once I heard this story of just amazing lady who exemplified this humbleness so well. There are two nuns named Marianne and also Margaret. They're from Austria. But right after graduating from nursing school, they're nuns, but they're also nurse. That was in 1955. They read about this leprous colony in Korea. In Korea, there's a leprous colony called Sorok Island. This little island, the south of Korea. And what government did was they brought all the people with Hansen's disease, the leprosy, and they basically isolated them into that island. Took them away from other people's eyes. So these lepers were living in this small island. These two nurses, read about them, and they volunteered to go there. And they were in their 20s. So these beautiful, young, white, young ladies came to this Sorok Island with just one bag of, their clothes, and they stayed there for 40 years. And when it was time for them to retire, this part is more amazing. When they realized that they're getting old, so they could not do the job that they used to, and in fearing that they may become a burden to the community, to the center where they were serving, they left 2 letters saying that, it's time for us to go. And then they left quietly, without letting anyone know, with that bag of clothes that they came with. There was no farewell reception. There was no, Thanksgiving plaque. Nothing. They just left quietly. I wonder, when you go to heaven, and one of them, Margaret, passed away last year at the age of 88. I wonder when we go to heaven, wouldn't those people like those two are the people who'll be sitting at the head of the table, right? And I also wonder if this remote Sorok Island, whether that was a seed that God always kept his eyes on. I want to show you this map. There's a first map that I want to show you. Probably you have seen this kind of map before, right? It's the map of the United States taken at night from the satellite. And it shows, and these lights are actual lights, that was produced in the cities and villages and stuff like that. And you can see where more people live, right? It's the East Coast. And can you spot Colorado Springs? It's kind of the darker area, right? And I wonder if this Sorok Island was put in a map like this, what kind of place would Sorok Island be on? This kind of map will be a place where you have lots of lights, or will be a place where, kind of dark. You can take down the map, thank you. Probably Sorok Island will be a place where it'll be like corner where nothing much to see. Probably the last place that you look at on a map like this one, like that one. But wasn't Sorok Island, where Sister Mary and Sister Margaret were, a place brighter and warmer than anyone else in the eyes of God? That probably, Sorok Island, will be a place that God would honor than New York City or Chicago or LA. Won't it be? There's another place like that. There's a village called Black Mountain in South Carolina. Does anybody know Black Mountain in South Carolina? It's the little town with a population of 8,000. It's a really small place, right? So by the world standard, it may seem like an insignificant corner of the world. But that is one place that I believe that God would regard as one of his precious seeds of honor. Why? Because that Black Mountain is a place where about 40 former missionaries to South Korea live. Most of them served for 20 to 40 years. And now I heard that many have passed away, so there are only about 20 of them remaining there. But these are the people who dedicated their youth and lifetime serving this impoverished Korea in 1950s and 1960s. Healing the sick, caring for the tuberculous patients, traveling from village to village and island to island, wearing worn-out black rubber shoes and building churches. There's one missionary who was famous for wearing black rubber shoes. And he went just every place in the south west corner of Korea, including all the islands. A place where these individuals whom God so dearly cherished and esteems gather before the Lord, praising his grace and living together. There's this one Korean media company which tried to make a documentary. So the cameraman and a reporter went to visit Black Mountain place, and they got lost in that small downtown. They didn't know where to go, and there was this old couple were taking their afternoon walk, and when they saw them, two Korean men, they walked up to him and said, "안녕하세요." And these reporters were shocked because out of nowhere, this white town, this white man comes up to them and speak to them in Korean. And up until recently, these people gathered together once a month, sing hymns in Korean, eating Korean food, sharing Korean food, and remembering what God had done through them in Korea. When they gathered together, they worship in Korean. It was kind of odd sight. This is indeed a place where, even though to the eyes of the world, Black Mountain is a very insignificant, place that not many people care for. But like the Sorok Island, I think Black Mountain will be a place in God's eyes is a place of honor, a place of His glory. And I wondered about our church and this Colorado Springs, where this could be that kind of place. Last Sunday, one of the Chisanim, a deacon, came up to me and said she was very upset because she was talking to somebody in in Chicago, and she was talking to him about me, that we have this pastor from Chicago. His name is Pastor T.J. Kim, and the other guy knew me. I was like, wow, that's amazing, and this is what offended this Chipsanim, and this person from Chicago said, "What's he doing in that boondock area?" What's he doing in that boondock area? And she felt offended because, Colorado Springs is not a boondock, right? This is a hustling, bustling city, right? And I thought, when I came here, this is a wonderful town, wonderful city. We have everything, right? We have everything that big cities have. We have about a dozen different places of hamburger joint. This is just a great place. But last week I went to New Jersey to see my old seminary buddies, and then I realized that Colorado Springs is really indeed small. When I was flying, I went to New Jersey and I flew into Newark Airport, and I flew out of the Newark Airport. And then on my way back, the gate that I had to take the plane that came to Denver, the gate number was 8A, Terminal A, 111. Means there's at least 111 gates in the Terminal A. And the Newark Airport has, 4 terminals, A, B, C, D. So which means it has at least 400 terminals. Do you know how many terminals that Colorado Springs Airport have? 12. We have 12 gates. That's it. 12 gates. I told you this before. When I first came here, I preached for the first time here at church, and I was flying back to Chicago, and then I had a really nice lunch because you guys always feed people well. So I felt really heavy. So it was before getting on the plane, I felt like maybe I need to do some exercise. I decided to walk around the whole terminal, right? So I walked around the whole terminal, all 12 gates. I looked at my watch, and it took me 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Just at the Newark Airport, I walked around to find my gates. My step thing showed me that I took 4,000 steps. Well, so, this might be a rural area. This might be a small and significant place when you look at it from the world's perspective. But I believe that this remote place with only 12 gates for the airplane will and can become the brightest seat of honor in God's glory, the most shining place when viewed from heaven. I hope that there will be this church in Colorado Springs can be a spot with such a bright, shining light of God's glory, that this be a spot where God cannot take His eyes off. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing all this mission works. That's why we're doing children's festival today. That's why I gather together every morning to pray. And that's why we're also supporting all those missionaries. I want to share one more map with you. This is a satellite image of the Korean Peninsula. Same thing. taken at night from the satellite. And you can see that South Korea is really bright. The north is just darkness. It's not Photoshop thing. I mean, this is the real thing. They haven't done anything to this picture. North Korea, because they don't have much electricity, it is really dark at night. To shed a light there, again, we're planning to visit North Korean Missionary Center in October. You may take it down, thank you. And through that kind of efforts, I'm hoping and I believe that this church in Colorado Springs, this remote, out-of-the-road place, that place that other people may think of as a boondock area, will become a shining seed of God's heavenly glory that God cannot take his eyes off. And folks, your life too, though they may seem insignificant in the eyes of the world, will become and can become the seed of God's radiant kingdom's glory when viewed by our Father in heaven. It is my prayer that your lives will be filled with the deeds of goodness known to God. It is my prayer that, sometimes it is one of my prayers that we may have this secret with God, the things that only God and I know, that nobody else need to know. But it's the things that I do for God that only God can know. It is my prayer that you'll have a lot of those secrets that you do for God, but only that God knows, and that stuff that no one else has to know. And I also pray that beautiful secrets unique to Colorado Springs, known only to God and us, and unknown to New York, Chicago, LA, are just filled, in us, among us. This can be the seed of honor in God's eyes. This may not be as magnificent as other places, but in God's eyes, Colorado Springs can be like Black Mountain and also Sorok Island. And your life and my life may not be significant in the eyes of the world, but our lives, the place that we are, the family that we live in, can be a place with the great light shining, the revealing the glory of God. Once again, I pray that this place and your lives to become the most shining corner in the map of God's kingdom. Let us pray.